So welcome back to the lesson 6 of the Extension Master Gardener Turfgrass training modules. And this section we will about establishment and cultivation that you will be utilizing on your warm season and cool season lawns. One of the biggest issues that we deal with in turfgrass is thatch. Thatch is an organic layer that forms above the soil level but below the turf canopy itself. It contains dead organic debris, live roots, crowns, and stems. It does not have a very nutritional value. Sometimes it can be hydrophobic, which means it doesn't contain water. So thatch, most of the time, is a bad thing. You can tolerate up to about a ½ an inch of thatch in your lawn. That's like a blanket. But once you get over a ½ an inch, you may need to get rid of that, because now you have roots and crowns and things growing in an area that's not soaking up water, or that if it does, it dries out real fast and has no nutritional value. Thatch is one of the leading causes of decreased drought resistance, as it fills up with water, doesn't allow water to get to the soil. As soon as it gets hot and dry, it dries out, so people end up having to water more and more and more to keep that thatch wet and to keep that plant alive. So it results, and it's caused by a couple of different things. It results when accumulation of organics exceed the rate of degradation. So I mean, there's more stuff getting built up than it is getting degraded out of it. And this is caused by high fertilization practices, mowing too high or too infrequent, wet, cold soils, compacted soils, maybe chemicals that have inhibited microbial activity that can't decay or break down that material, and or earthworms, and saline soils. So these species, there's many different species out there, but it's mainly the ones that have rhizomes or stolons that produce more thatch. We don't see as much thatch in fescue compared to a bluegrass, or fescue compared to Bermudagrass or zoysia grass. So the more rapid that grass is growing, we tend to see more thatch buildup. So the problems with thatch, it's puffy, so it can lead to scalping. So that means that thatch will squish down like a sponge, and then you'll end up scalping everything else because the crown of the plants and the plant is a little bit higher, where you took your mower tracks over it, it didn't scalp. So that's one of the problems with it. And because its roots and crowns are growing in that, you don't have good drought stress. You can have a lot of winter desiccation, which means it just dries out and dies. And you don't have a lot of cold and heat stress. It's difficult to wet. If you've seen a sponge that you've used over and over and over, say in your kitchen, at some point you can put that sponge under the faucet and the water runs completely off of it. It stops absorbing the water. That's the exact same thing thatch can do. And now you have that sponge layer above your soil layer, and you have roots and crowns and turf growing in it. It's now not able to get that water, so it stresses itself and dies. So there's a couple things that you can do to thatch. Prevention, just make sure you manage the turf correctly. Correct watering, correct fertility, correct mowing frequency. We're just going to bulk all that prevention into manage the turf correctly. Now, you can enhance the microbial activity. You can do this by light applications of lime, because thatch is acidic, so that will change your pH. You can aerify, which is the next practice that we'll talk about, which is the process of removing a core, pokes a hole through that thatch. Now roots can grow down through it, water can get through it. And you can top dress with sand and soil. Some people call this dilution is the solution type of thing. So if you just dilute that thatch with nutritional value type things, or sand and soil, then you're able to grow roots in that area instead of it being 100% thatch. It's easier to mechanically remove it, and then you don't have to worry about it for a while. That can be done by vertical mowing or verticutting, power-raking, dethatching. It's named a bunch of different things, but not burning, not recommended for thatch removal. So one of the ways you can get rid of it is aerification or aerifying. This is a process of poking holes in the ground and removing those cores. You can buy aerifiers or sea aerifiers that only poke a hole in the ground. That will help with thatch management, but that will not help with compaction because you're actually just poking a hole in the ground and you still have the same bulk density there. If you remove that core, now you have helped the bulk density and you've removed compaction. I really like these drum type rollers. You can rent them, they work really well. And so when you do this aerification, you relieve compaction, you have thatch control, you've also improved air movement and water movement in and out of that soil. So air movement in and out, water infiltration, especially if you had a compacted soil, if you were watering it, it's probably running off before it got into the soil where the roots are contained. It improves the health of the lawn. It makes a home for fertilizer. So if you're going to overseed, we're going to talk about this here in a second in the process. When you poke the hole in the ground, you've now got an area where the fertilizer can go into, and it's more readily available to the plant instead of sitting on the surface and then having to get washed down into the soil and then taken up by the plant. How often do you do this? It depends on a lot of things. If you have a heavy soil, a very clay soil, you may need to do it more often. If you have dogs, if you have kids running around, you have areas where you're driving a cart, you may need to do those areas more often because of the practices that are around it. Could be as often as once a year. But it could be non-existent unless you have thatch type of thing. Another way of removing thatch is by a verticutter or aerifying or power-rake. It's called multiple things. And this is a machine that has a shaft on it, blades that spin and really rip up everything above the soil surface. And so what that does is rip that thatch up off the ground, and then you eventually have to reseed because you have tore that up, but you have now removed it. For cool season grasses, you want to do this in the fall because you're going to have to reseed afterwards. For warm season grasses, you want to do this in the spring or June because that's when they're going to be able to grow. Now say if I had a Bermudagrass and I had thatch in it, or a zoysia grass lawn and I had thatch in it, and I went in with a verticutter, would I have to reseed that lawn? No, exactly right, because it has rhizomes and stolons that it can come back from. Different if you are doing a cool season lawn, because you are probably going to rip up a lot of those plants with the like tall fescue if you are dethatching. So it doesn't have the rhizomes or the stolons to come back from. So this is when it starts. You're like, I got to start all over again. So if you had thatch, you can remove the thatch and you can have overseeding, which is trying to keep the existing stand, or you can start all over. We're going to start with starting all over and then adapt the overseeding into it. But the first thing you want to do if you're going to start all over is conduct a soil test. Just go ahead and do it, get it out of the way. It's going to tell you what you need to put down, and since you're doing a major renovation project, you might as well put down the right stuff and not put down stuff that you don't need, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. If you need to start incorporating lime or sulfur into it, this is the perfect time to do it because you're going to start all over. Oh, the first thing you do is get rid of what's there. Okay? You may have to go in with a non-selective herbicide like glyphosate, spray, kill it. Maybe just the dethatching that you've done has done enough of removing that material, and you're going to seed into it. There's a lot of different options out there. Say if you're gonna redo the whole thing, then you would spray glyphosate, and then you would come in and you would fix any problem that you may have with surface grading. This is the time to do it. If you got water running towards your house, if you've got a ditch, you've already killed everything, take the time and do the rough grading, fix your low spots. From there, you would want to till your soil. Till soil 10 to 12 inches. This is another textbook number. It is very difficult to till a front yard 10 to 12 inches. Gardens, we probably are. We have been working with that soil for years and years and adding material to it. A little bit easier. Lawn, not so easy. Do the best you can. You don't want to do it when it's too wet, and you don't want to do it when it's too dry. Too dry makes it powdery. Too wet clumps it up and actually can make bigger issues than not. Small areas, you can use a hand rake to kind of finalize those things. And this is the time you incorporate your lime or your sulfur or even your fertilizer. You can go ahead and put it in there when you're tilling it and get it all mixed up as well. And then if you're seeding, you're commonly going to be tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass. You can do those in the fall. Buffalo grass, zoysia, and Bermuda grass, you're going to be doing that in the springtime. Sodding, you're going to be doing the same thing, Kentucky bluegrass and tall fescue in the fall. You can do them year round, the cool season grasses, when it comes to sodding, but I recommend in the fall. You're just going to have a better, healthier plant, and you're not going to be struggling with the warm seasons, high temperatures. If you're going to be plugging or sprigging, you can do zoysia and Bermuda grass, and you want to do those in the spring as well. Seeding a new lawn, for example, Kentucky bluegrass, 2 to 3 pounds of seed per 1,000 square feet, whether it's new or overseeding. And overseeding just means you're trying to put more into your existing lawn. Okay. Tall fescue, 6 to 8 pounds of a new lawn, and overseeding, you can cut it in half, so you're looking at 3 to like 5 pounds. Then you would go in with mulch straw, aged straw, kind of cover it. That helps hold the moisture in. There's nice new mats now. I don't know if anybody has seen them. That's kind of straw mats that you can roll out. Those work really, really well. Those are typically going to be weed-free. Seed labels can guarantee what's in a seed bag, but I haven't never seen a label on a bale of straw and guaranteed weed-free. So that's something to consider. And you don't need to remove those mulch straw areas. Just leave them there. They will decay. They'll be perfectly fine. As the grass grows up, you just mow through them. Now sod, sounds crazy, but 100 square feet yards of sod are going to be required for a 100,000 square foot of lawn area. Sod's pretty self-explanatory. So after you've cleaned everything up and you've done it, then you would go in and you would either seed or you would sod. Now before you seed, if you're going to overseed, you want to use an air fire, verticutter, seed slicer, and really tear that soil up. That's going to help you get good seed to soil contact. Okay? You want to make sure that seed is in the soil and not in the thatch. Okay? Same thing if you're overseeding and you've got a lawn in there and say you've just aerified, you got to mow it down a little bit, and then you're going to seed on top of it. You want that seed to get to the soil. You don't want it to sit up in the canopy type of thing. And to do that, after you aerify, you can use a broadcast spreader or a drop, like I talked about in the fertility. Make sure you go in 2 directions to evenly distribute it. If you're using a drop spreader, make sure that you are going wheel to wheel and getting good coverage with it as well. So with seeding, cool season grasses definitely done in the fall instead of the spring. You can do it in the spring. Fall is better timing for a couple reasons. The environment's really nice. You have warm soil temperatures. But in the fall, you're not going to be dealing with crabgrass and other summer annual weeds. There may be crabgrass there, but there are no new crabgrass going to germinate starting now. In the springtime, yes, it's going to be cooler temperatures, but you're going to be seeding tall fescue or a cool season grass, and then shortly after that, you're going to have crabgrass come in and goosegrass come in those summer annuals. So you're going to have a lot of plant and weed competition. So fall works best. When you do sod, you can do it anywhere, or bare spots, you can do it any time of the year. We talked about, if you have dogs and then you have dog spots in your yard, sometimes it's generally easier, even if it's not the best time of year. If you have a bare spot, go ahead and put some seed down, regardless of what time it is, in small areas to try to get some cover. And like we talked about before, verticut, garden rake, cut grooves in the soil to get good seed and soil contact. Now what do you like to use? We'll do seed selection. Make sure you go and look at the recommended turfgrass varieties, tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass. This is all located here. I won't go through it too much. You can go to the resources and see which varieties are the best. And then the last thing I'll talk about real quick is seed labels. Seed labels contain very important information. The first thing it contains is what components in it. For example, this contains tall fescue, Bravo, Magellan tall fescue, Padre tall fescue, and Shamrock Kentucky bluegrass. And then you've got purity over here on the side, 30, 30, 30, and 10. So you've got 90% tall fescue, 10% bluegrass in this blend. it's going to tell you what the germination rate is. So on these, this germination rate's 93, 95, 92, 84. That's a pretty good germination rate. If you start buying seed and you're getting into low germination rates, you're just buying a bunch of seed stuff. And so then you got to seed actually higher rates so you get the actual recommended seeding rate. But these two things right here are what I want to focus on before we finish. Other crop seeds. Other crop seeds can be good or bad. Okay? Good means it's actually sold as another crop. Bad as in you're not trying to grow that other crop. Okay? So for example, if you had 5%, or not 5%, a 0.5%, 0.5% of something you don't know what it is, that they're selling as something else in another bag, you're going to plant 12 to 16 seeds of something else per square foot. And we don't know what it is. So good seed is less than 0.01%. Just buy seed that has 0% other crop in it. And if you get a good quality seed, it's going to have 0%. And that's very similar when it comes to weed seeds. Weed seed, are mainly concerned with annual bluegrass and orchard grass. These have no selective ways of getting it out of a lawn once it's put in there. So if you plant these in the lawn, there's no way to kill it unless you're going to spray Roundup on it or hand pull it by itself. So, now there is an off-of-the-wall type of way of seeding. It's called dormant seeding. This will kind of wrap up the seeding, and then we'll talk about sodding and sprigging and be done for the day. Dormant seeding is the absolute wrong time of year of everything that I've said for all the other training modules prior to. It's going out and seeding in December. And it's using the freezing and thawing of the soil to incorporate that seed into it. And then when the spring comes and it warms up, the seed is there and it's ready to sprout. Well, it's now springtime and you're going to have competition with weeds. And because you put it out in the wintertime, you're going to have what's called seed mortality. Some of that seed's just going to die. It's going to get some water in it, it's going to freeze, it's going to bust. You know, this works really well in areas that I know where guys don't have irrigation, and it's the only time that they can get out on large acreage to maybe overseed a golf course. But it is something that can be done. Some people have seen it do really well. Now, sodding of cool season grasses, we kind of hit that already, but it's best done in the fall with cool season grasses because it's the optimal time of the year to grow. But if you need to do it, if you have to do it, you can do it year-round. It just may be a little tougher in the spring. It may be a little tougher in the summertime because you're going to be dealing with the heat and dealing with the drought. Now, sprigging, this can be done with Bermudagrass and zoysia grass, although Bermudagrass does a lot better than zoysia grass. This is planting those rhizomes and stolons on top of the surface like you would be doing sodding or seeding, and then you're just letting those grow out from there. Now when it comes to fertility and watering, so now we've got the soil prepped, we've got the seed sod or plugs out. Fertility is very simple. Everything we already talked about before. Just stay on the same fertility program of existing lawn. You may want to do a starter fertilizer as one of those applications that have some phosphorus like we talked about in the fertility section, but it's what we've kind of already previously mentioned. Now watering is a little bit different. Watering, you want to soak the seed bed thoroughly to begin with, or the sod bed or sprig bed or whatever you want to call it, and then you got to keep it moist. These plants are now tender. They're small, they're not healthy, so you may have to do more frequent light watering to begin with. And then as those roots start to develop, you can start spacing that frequency out until you get back to kind of your regularly scheduled, deep and infrequent, normal type of schedule. And then the last thing, or two last things, is mowing. Don't let it get too long. If you want to maintain it 3 inches, you let it get to the 4.5 inches, the 1/3 rule, and mow it down. Those plants are pretty resilient, and it'll grow back. Don't let it get knee high before you mow the new grass off. It's okay. You can walk on it. It'll be okay. It'll survive it. So definitely don't wait till it's too long to mow. Weed control. biggest thing in weed control is prevention prior to. I don't like the use of Sidron or 2% because it's way too expensive. It's a pre-emerge herbicide you can put down to prevent weeds from coming in. But mainly, wait till it gets growing a little bit. Mow it 3 or 4 times, and then if you have some weeds in the area, then you can go apply it. The label on a herbicide will tell you how many times or how long to wait. It may be specific as wait 3 weeks from germination. And that's 3 weeks from when you saw it starting to grow, not 3 weeks from when you applied it, because you know it may take 3 to 5 days in perfect conditions or 7 to 14 days for bluegrass for it to grow. So with that, we've covered, you know, the key concepts. There's some other videos that you can watch about overseeding in the module. There's some common mistakes, you know, poor soil prep, poor weed control, poor quality of seed that has weed seeds in it. Make sure you cover that. Seeding at the wrong time, the wrong rate. And more grass seed is not all better either. If you plant too high of a grass seed, then you may end up getting too much crowding, and not one plant can be healthy enough to survive. And then it's called damping off and will end up dying. Make sure you get good contact with the soil, water it properly, and don't wait too long before you mow. I know that was a lot in a short bit of time, but that kind of wraps up the establishment and cultivation practices for turfgrass and really builds a foundation for turfgrass management. We have a lot more resources here when it comes to cultivation and establishment, because this is one of the main practices that are done on turf. So please check those out for more information that will go into more details about some of the specific practices that we had talked about. Thank you very much.